truth Hollywood tried to hide. They were trailblazers, actors, musicians, pioneers, whose talent reshaped culture. But in the 1980s and 1990s, a silent epidemic struck, taking their lives just as they were at the height of their glory. AIDS took their lives, but left no legacy. Today, we honor 20 extraordinary LGBTQ+ stars whose influence lives on long after the light has faded. Freddie Mercury, a voice that didn't just shake the world, but reshaped its soul. He didn't merely sing, he unleashed emotion with a force that felt volcanic, shaking the air around him. Born Farrokh Bulsara in Zanzibar, he rebuilt himself piece by piece, rising into one of the most unforgettable icons rock music has ever known. With Queen, he didn't just create songs, he forged a modern legend. Bohemian Rhapsody, We Are the Champions, Somebody to Love, these weren't simply tracks. They were emotional earthquakes, tearing through boundaries of opera, rock, and pure human vulnerability. On stage, he was untouchable, magnetic, fearless, absolutely unstoppable. He burned so brightly it felt like he could light the world forever. But even the brightest stars carry shadows. In 1987, Freddie was diagnosed with HIV, during an era when the word alone inspired fear, stigma, and cruelty. He chose silence not out of shame, but to protect the dignity of his life's work. And even as his body weakened, he refused to let the disease steal the fire inside him. He kept writing, kept recording, kept giving every last breath to the music that defined him. When he appeared in These Are the Days of Our Lives, the world saw what AIDS had begun to take from him: the weight lost, the fragility, the quiet pain behind his smile. Yet his eyes still burned with pride, defiance, and a kind of immortal strength. It was heartbreaking. It was heroic. It was Freddie Mercury refusing to be erased. He left us at the end of 1991, taken far too soon by a disease that stole countless brilliant souls from the world. But Freddie's voice didn't fall silent. It refused. The Mercury Phoenix Foundation, created in his honor, continues the fight against HIV, a battle he never got the chance to win. Steve Rubell was the man who turned the nightlife of the late 1970s into a veritable legend. If you weren't at Studio 54, you weren't part of the story New York was telling. And at the center of that glittering chaos was Rubell, champagne glass in hand, the charming and unpredictable host of Manhattan's most dazzling playground. He didn't just own a club, he created an atmosphere where the fantastical became real, where the ordinary vanished the moment you walked through the door. One night, you might find Mick Jagger and Andy Warhol whispering in a dark corner while Grace Jones rode in on a white horse. Movie stars, city kids, and construction workers all moved together under the same rotating spotlight. In Rubell's world, status was nothing. Magic was everything. Born in Brooklyn in 1943, Rubell never intended to become a nightlife icon. But when he and partner Ian Schrager transformed a rundown CBS studio into Studio 54, they captured lightning in a bottle. The club exploded into a cultural center until the IRS shut it down in 1979. Rubell and Schrager served time in prison for tax evasion, but Steve was undaunted. After his release, he helped pioneer the boutique hotel movement, combining luxury with personal style and reshaping the hospitality industry. Behind the scenes, however, his health was quietly failing. In the mid-1980s, he was diagnosed with HIV, a fact he faced with remarkable dignity. On July 25, 1989, at the age of 45, Rubell's brilliance faded, but his legacy never faded. Studio 54 remains a symbol of art, freedom, and rebellion. A poignant reminder that, for one man, the night was his masterpiece. Robert Reed was the man who shaped the image of the perfect American father, even as he harbored a truth he could never share publicly. To millions, he was Mike Brady, calm, steady, patient, the dad every child wanted. His warm smile became synonymous with the Brady Bunch, making him a symbol of kindness and quiet strength. But behind that perfect image, Reed carried a personal burden that his fame never allowed him to reveal. Born in 1932 as John Robert Wrights Jr., he was a classically trained actor who preferred Shakespeare and theater to the attention of sitcoms. Yet the role that made him beloved also subjected him to Hollywood expectations, an image he could not break without risking everything. Reed was gay in an era when honesty meant career self-destruction. To survive, he hid the truth and buried himself in his craft, demanding perfection, not for ego, but as armor. On set, he could appear tough, even belligerent, but his young co-stars later said he felt like a real father, protective, encouraging, and deeply caring. That was his heartbreaking paradox. The man who always presented honesty could never fully live it down. In 1991, Reed was diagnosed with colon cancer, but only a few close friends knew he was also battling HIV. He died the following year at the age of 59. The official cause was cancer, but rumors of AIDS soon emerged, adding a fragile layer to his story. Decades later, the cast of the Brady Bunch continues to honor him, not just as the ideal TV dad, but as an artist and a man who quietly endured the high price of authenticity. Willi Smith was more than just a designer. He was a bold, queer creative force who made fashion a living mirror of real people. He didn't dress royalty or red carpets. He designed for people rushing down the street, for people laughing, dreaming, and surviving. Born in Philadelphia in 1948, Willi brought warmth, color, and unabashed humanity to an industry that often closed its doors to anyone who didn't fit its narrow mold. When he launched WilliWear in 1976, Willi sparked a quiet revolution. Long before streetwear became popular, he combined comfort and high fashion into something playful and radically inclusive. His designs told working people, artists, dreamers, and outsiders, especially gay outsiders, that they deserved to be seen. By the mid-1980s, WilliWear was bringing in more than $25 million a year. Collaborators, from filmmakers to dancers to architects, were drawn to his spirit and creative freedom. He even designed the iconic wedding dress for Mary Jane Watson in the Spider-Man comics. Willi not only shaped the look of America in the 1980s, but also the country's optimism. But behind the glitz and glamour was a quiet struggle. As a proud gay man living in an era that punished difference, Willi kept his HIV diagnosis private. The stigma was brutal, and the world was much harsher. When AIDS complications claimed his life in 1987, at the age of 39, it was a devastating loss, not just for fashion, but for culture, the LGBTQ+ community, and for all those who felt seen through his work. Today, his legacy lives on through museum exhibitions and the Willi Smith Community Archives, which preserve the story of a gay Black designer who proved that style truly isn't about status, it's about the soul. And while AIDS took his life too soon, it can never dim the light he lit in American creativity. Rudolph Nureyev, the rebel who turned ballet into a dangerous sport. Born in 1938 on a train across Soviet Siberia, he entered the world ready to move. From a poor childhood, he rose with an iron will and unshakable talent. Every leap seemed to defy gravity. Every movement was a rebellion against limits. In 1951, during the Kirov Ballet Tour in Paris, he made the boldest move of his life, defecting from the Soviet Union and choosing freedom over fear. Overnight, he became not just a dancer but a symbol of artistic rebellion and human courage. In the West, Nureyev was unstoppable. His collaboration with Dame Margot Fonteyn became legendary. Her grace balanced his raw intensity. Their chemistry transformed ballet into something fierce and modern. He brought masculine power to a stage that had long been soft and polite, making it thrilling and alive again. Offstage, he lived as passionately as his bold, free-spirited, and unashamed performance style. By the 1980s, rumors about his health began to circulate. Nureyev was diagnosed with HIV, but he did not let the disease define him. Even as his body weakened, he continued to choreograph, perform, and lead the Paris Opera Ballet with unparalleled fire. His final appearances showed a man who would never succumb to silence. When he died in 1993 at the age of 54, the world mourned, but his spirit never faded. Nureyev didn't just dance. He battled gravity, fear, and time, leaving behind a legacy that still moves with every heartbeat on stage. Wade Dominguez, the star who shines so brightly, he possesses the charisma that makes the world stop for a moment. W.D. Dominguez is pure energy, strong yet gentle, confident yet vulnerable. In Dangerous Minds, 1995, he portrayed Emilio Ramirez, the troubled college student whose raw emotions captivated audiences. Born in Santa Clara County, California, to Mexican and French parents, WDE's striking looks and fearless charisma made him unforgettable. Before he became an actor, he was a dancer, commanding attention with every move, a skill that he displayed seamlessly on screen. Hollywood had finally found a new kind of leading man, both dangerous and profound. But behind the scenes, Wade was living with AIDS, a fact he kept secret during a time when the industry lacked sympathy or understanding. Yet he never stopped working or dreaming. In 1998, as his health was failing, he watched a rough cut of The Taxman from his hospital bed. Elizabeth Berkley, his close friend and co-star, sat next to him as he smiled through tears and quietly said, "I'm good." He wasn't wrong. Though Wade's journey ended too soon, his legacy lives on. His performances continue to be broadcast online, inspiring new fans who never saw him in his own time. Wade Dominguez remains a reminder that true excellence, the kind of talent born of passion and truth, burns forever, even when the spotlight is turned off. Ed Koch, the mayor who made New York buzz but was silent when it mattered most. With his signature smile and famous question, "What am I doing?" Ed Koch turned politics into a spectacle. From 1978 to 1989, he led New York through financial crisis, crime waves, and power outages, reviving a city many thought beyond saving. He was bold, funny, and quotable, embodying New York's resilience and charm. Koch didn't just lead the city, he was the city, a symbol of unyielding resilience. But when the AIDS crisis began to ravage his streets, that resounding voice fell silent. Hospitals were overwhelmed, families were grieving, and activists were calling for help. Still, Koch hesitated. Critics say fear and politics kept him quiet, while rumors about his personal life fueled speculation. He never spoke out, refusing to label himself in an age where honesty could end careers. For some, his silence was self-defense. For others, it was an unforgivable failure. In later years, Koch admitted he wished he had done more to respond to the crisis, calling it one of his biggest regrets. Despite the controversies, he remained a beloved figure among many New Yorkers, a man whose humor and enduring optimism helped rebuild a shattered city. When he died in 2013 at age 88, the Empire State Building was lit up in his honor, a reminder that even flawed leaders can leave a lasting mark. Denholm Elliott, the gentleman who dominates every frame. You may not know his name, but you have seen his face, his mischievous eyes, his quiet charm that makes every moment on screen real. Denholm Elliott is Hollywood's secret weapon, the man who can turn a supporting role into the soul of a film. As the lovable Marcus Brody in Indiana Jones, or the compassionate Mr. Emerson in A Room with a View, he doesn't just act. He lives every word, every moment. Born in London in 1922, Elliott lived through the horrors of World War II before turning that quiet strength into a career spanning more than 125 films and television roles. In person, he is witty, kind, and delightfully eccentric, a true English gentleman with a mischievous glint in his eye. But behind that charm, he carries a personal burden. In 1987, Elliott was diagnosed with HIV at a time when fear and stigma outweighed understanding. Choosing dignity over drama, he continued to work, refusing to let his illness define his story. He lived, acted, and inspired until 1992, when he died of AIDS-related complications at the age of 70. Today, Denholm Elliott's legacy lives on. The BAFTA Award named after him honors rising actors who bring sincerity and dedication to their craft, the very qualities he embodied. More than 3 decades later, his work still reminds audiences that true greatness doesn't demand attention. It achieves it quietly, scene by scene, indelibly. Edwin Ellis was more than just a fashion designer. He was a quiet pioneer who redefined American style with nothing but imagination, wit, and a gentle smile. At a time when menswear felt rigid and predictable, Ellis brought color, playfulness, and a fresh sense of freedom. His designs were modern without being pretentious, easygoing without being simple, and unmistakable. He was the heartbeat of 1980s fashion, a man of endless creativity. But behind the glamour and success, Perry lived in a world that did not accept his true identity. As a gay man in a brutally racist era, he learned to protect his privacy with the same care he took in his work. As his health began to fail in the mid-1980s, rumors spread quickly, and the fashion world watched with fear and confusion. AIDS was a word spoken in whispers, a shadow that would snatch countless brilliant lives before the world understood. Ellis never confirmed the rumors. He maintained his dignity, grace, and dedication to creating beauty until the end of his life. When he died in 1986 at the age of 46, the fashion industry lost not just a designer, but a pioneer whose artistic talent was only in its infancy. Today, Perry Ellis remains a symbol of quiet courage and timeless talent. His legacy lives on in every bold design, every modern silhouette, every designer who dared to dream differently. He is a reminder that genius can be gentle, and that even when life is cut short, its impact can last forever. Rock Hudson wasn't just a movie star. He was Hollywood's perfect illusion. Tall, breathtakingly handsome, with a smile that could soften any scene, he became the golden boy of the silver screen. To the world, he was the ultimate leading man, rugged, romantic, effortlessly heroic. But behind that flawless image was a man forced to live in the shadows of his own fame. At a time when being openly gay meant career suicide, Hudson learned to split himself in two. The icon millions adored, and the human being almost no one truly knew. When he was diagnosed with AIDS in the early 1980s, the news hit him with the quiet force of tragedy. He grew weaker, but he refused to let the world see him fade. He kept working, kept showing up, kept holding on to the dignity that had carried him through decades in the spotlight. But the truth could only stay hidden for so long. In 1985, when his illness became public, Rock Hudson instantly became the most famous face of the AIDS crisis, not by choice, but by circumstance. Yet in that moment, something extraordinary happened. The stigma cracked. The world for the first time had to confront the reality of AIDS not as a distant fear, but a human story. His final months were heartbreaking, but his courage reshaped history. Rock Hudson didn't simply die a legend. He changed how a generation understood compassion, illness, and the cost of silence. Today, his legacy isn't just etched in Hollywood's Hall of Fame. It lives in the progress, awareness and empathy sparked by his bravery. And in that way, Rock Hudson remains one of the most important stars ever to shine on, and far beyond, the screen. Anthony Perkins was the kind of actor who didn't just play emotions, he exposed nerves. Tall, slender, with a quiet intensity that flickered beneath every glance, he carried an air of mystery Hollywood couldn't quite label. Audiences knew him best as Norman Bates in Psycho, a role so chilling, so disturbingly human, it reshaped the horror genre forever. But the brilliance Perkins brought to the screen came from a life lived in conflict. A man trying to navigate fame while hiding a truth the world wasn't ready for. Behind the camera lights, Anthony was gentle, thoughtful, almost painfully shy. A gay man in an era obsessed with maintaining facades, he spent decades tucking his real self behind carefully constructed performances. He married, had children, and kept up the image the industry demanded, even as he quietly battled the fear of being discovered. His life became a balancing act, the artist searching for freedom and the public figure fighting to survive. When he was diagnosed with AIDS in the early 1990s, Perkins chose to face his final chapter with honesty he'd been denied most of his life. In one of his last statements, he spoke of the compassion the world owed to those suffering, words that revealed a depth of empathy few ever saw. He passed away in 1992, leaving behind not just a legendary role, but a legacy shaped by brilliance, vulnerability, and a quiet resilience that outlived the stigma of his time. Anthony Perkins didn't just change cinema. He showed how fragile, complex, and profoundly human a screen legend could be. Keith Haring lived like a spark in a fuse, fast, bright, and impossible to ignore. He wasn't a brooding artist in a dark studio. He was the guy on the street corner, sleeves rolled up, painting hope into the concrete of New York City. His bold lines and neon colors were like a new language, one that could touch the heart of anyone who dared to look. You didn't need an art degree to understand him. You just needed a pulse. Growing up in Pennsylvania with a love of cartoons and comic books, Keith carried that sense of familiarity and playfulness into adulthood. When he arrived in New York, he found a city teeming with music, activism, and raw creative energy. And he dove right in. The subway became his canvas. The sidewalk became his stage. He believed that art shouldn't be protected. It had to burst into public life, to start conversations, to remind people that they were still alive. But behind the glitz, Keith was living through one of the darkest chapters in LGBTQ+ history. AIDS was more than a crisis. It was a storm that engulfed a generation. When he was diagnosed in 1988, he didn't back down. He pushed harder. He painted faster. His work became sharper, more urgent, imbued with the clarity that only those who race against time can achieve. In 1990, at age 31, Keith Haring's life ended, but his influence did not. His foundation continued to fight for the causes he believed in, and his art remained full of the vitality of someone who refused to let fear silence him. Keith left behind more than murals. He left behind a movement, one that still radiates with the fierce, playful energy that defined him. Klaus Nomi didn't just walk onto the stage. He arrived like a visitor from another world. With his porcelain face, blocky costumes, and soaring voice that ranged from a chilly falsetto to a thunderous operatic thunder, he shattered every preconceived notion of a performer. Amid the noise of New York City, Klaus didn't blend in. He transcended it all. Weird, mesmerizing, unforgettable. Born in Germany, he grew up obsessed with opera, sci-fi, and the idea of pushing reality a little further than it wanted to go. When he arrived in the East Village in the late 70s, it was a perfect intersection. Punk clubs, art houses, underground theater, Klaus conquered it all with a surreal presence that overwhelmed audiences. He wasn't performing, he was transforming. But behind that alien mystique was a gentle, shy man, searching for a place where he truly fit in. When the AIDS crisis began to ravage New York's creative community, Klaus became one of the first victims. The world barely understood the disease, and he faced it with a calm, collected demeanor that belied the performance he created on stage. He continued performing as long as he could, even as his body weakened and his friends disappeared in fear or grief. Klaus Nomi died in 1983 at the age of 39, long before the world realized what it had lost. Yet his influence has not faded. From the catwalk to the avant-garde, his mark is everywhere. Klaus left more than songs. He left a legend, a reminder that the boldest art often comes from people who never felt fully human in the first place. Liberace was more than a pianist. He was a glittering spectacle, a showman who transformed the stage into his own glittering kingdom. With his diamond-studded costumes, glowing candlesticks beside his grand piano, and a smile so bright it could light up Las Vegas, he became one of America's most recognizable entertainers. Audiences didn't just watch Liberace perform, they surrendered to him. He turned classical music into a party and performance art into a superpower. Born in Wisconsin to a working-class family, he rose from small clubs to national fame with nothing but prodigious talent and great taste. He blurred the lines between high art and popular culture, between sincerity and extravagance, until the world realized that one didn't matter. Everything Liberace touched, he amplified: the laughter, the drama, the charm, the glitter. But behind the rhinestones and thunderous applause was a life of constant struggle. As a gay man in a hostile era, he built walls of humor, glamour, and polite denial to protect a truth he knew the world wasn't ready to hear. As AIDS began to ravage the LGBTQ+ community, Liberace kept his illness hidden, guarding his privacy with the same intensity he brought to his performances. He died in 1987 at the age of 67, leaving behind a world of unanswered questions. Only later did the cause, AIDS-related complications, come to light, adding a final heartbreaking note to a life that was anything but smooth. Liberace remains a legend of pure performance art, a reminder that brilliance can be both dazzling and deeply human, and that sometimes the brightest lights cast the heaviest shadows. Sylvester wasn't just a singer, he was a disco-inspired liberation. With a voice that could soar to the heavens and vibrate straight through his chest, he offered a bold, unabashed joy that bordered on rebellion. On stage, decked out in glitter, his hair flowing, his heels thundering to the floor, he didn't perform for the crowd, he inspired them. "You Make Me Feel, Mighty Real" wasn't just a song, it was a manifesto, a mirror to anyone who'd ever felt different and dared to shine. Born in 1947, Sylvester grew up knowing he didn't fit the world's narrow expectations, so he created his own. From church choirs to underground drag groups to disco superstardom, he embraced a bold femininity that challenged norms long before the world pretended to honor them. His voice, soaring, shimmering, impossibly powerful, made him a star, but it was his authenticity that made him unforgettable. But behind the spotlight, Sylvester faced a rising storm. As AIDS swept through the LGBTQ+ community, he refused to be silenced or ashamed. Even as his health declined, he used his voice to speak out openly, urging people to get tested, to protect themselves, to fight for visibility when the world preferred to ignore them. His final years were not a retreat, but a fierce defiance, a refusal to let fear obscure his true self. Sylvester died in 1988 at the age of 41. His life tragically ended. But his voice, pure, gender-bending, boundary-breaking, still resonates across dance floors today, reminding the world that authenticity is a force in its own right, and that some spirits continue to shine even when the music stops. Michel Foucault was more than a philosopher. He was a force that reshaped the way the modern world thought. Sharp, persistent, and relentlessly curious, he dissected structures of power the way a surgeon dissects the human body. Precisely, fearlessly, and without remorse. Foucault grew up skeptical of everything society held sacred. By the time he published Discipline and Punish and A History of Sexuality, he had shattered intellectual boundaries that had stood for centuries without anyone daring to question them. He spoke of identity, desire, and freedom at a time when even whispering these truths could cost him his life or his career. And he didn't just study oppression from afar, he lived as a gay man in a world built to exclude people like him. The tension between danger and discovery defined his genius. It made his work burn with urgency. Behind the public lectures and packed auditoriums was a man constantly testing the limits of his own body. In the early 1980s, whispers of his failing health spread. When AIDS finally claimed his life in 1984, the news shocked the global academic community. He became one of the first world-renowned intellectuals whose death was publicly linked to the pandemic, a moment that forced society to confront a devastating reality it had tried to ignore. Foucault's death was not just a loss, it was a disruption. But his ideas, as sharp as broken glass and as vital as ever, continue to resonate. Today, he is cited everywhere, in politics and gender studies, in conversations about freedom, identity, and the body. Michel Foucault didn't just shape theory, he reshaped the world, and even in death, his voice remains undiminished. It continues to question, challenge, and push us to look deeper into the truths we most fear. Alvin Ailey didn't just choreograph dance, he carved freedom into motion. Every step, every arc of the body, every explosion of rhythm felt like a story pulled straight from the soul of America. Born in Texas in 1931, during a time when a black gay boy wasn't supposed to dream beyond survival, Ailey didn't just dream. He soared. When he founded the Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater, he built something revolutionary, a stage where black bodies weren't invisible, but powerful, poetic, undeniable. His dancers didn't move to impress, they moved to testify. Works like Revelations hit audiences like a spiritual awakening, raw, sacred, defiant. Ailey's choreography blended ballet, gospel, jazz, blues, and the lived experience of a community fighting to be seen. He gave dance a deeper pulse, a heartbeat shaped by joy and sorrow and a fierce hunger for liberation. But behind the curtain, Ailey fought battles the audience never saw. He carried the weight of expectation, of representation, and of a world that still demanded silence from men like him. When AIDS crept into his life in the 1980s, he refused to let the illness overshadow the company he built or the dancers he loved. Even as his body weakened, he continued shaping performances that left audiences breathless, pouring the last of his strength into the art that had saved him. In 1989, at just 58, Alvin Ailey passed, too soon, too quietly for a man whose work roared with life. His death shook the dance world, but it didn't dim the fire he sparked. Today, his company remains one of the most celebrated in the world, carrying forward his belief that dance is more than movement. It is memory. It is resistance. It is truth. And Alvin Ailey's truth still rises, on every stage, in every leap, in every dancer he set free. Gia Carangi didn't step into the fashion world. She leaped into it like a bolt of lightning. In the late 1970s, when the fashion industry still worshipped polished perfection, Gia brought something far more dangerous: authenticity. Overnight, she became fashion's new obsession, the kind of model who didn't pose but confessed to the lens. Gia grew up yearning for connection, struggling with chaos long before fame found her. She was glamorous, rebellious, and painfully young, a girl who just wanted to be held, yet was adored by millions who didn't know her. But the glamour was a thin shield. Loneliness clung to her at every photo shoot, every runway, every after-party. Drugs became an escape she couldn't give up, and slowly the fashion world that once worshipped her began to turn its back on her. By the mid-80s, Gia found herself battling a different kind of darkness. HIV, a disease she contracted at a time when stigma was more dangerous than the disease itself. As her body weakened, the industry that had built her legend tried to pretend she never existed. But Gia refused to fade away quietly. In the final year of her life, she entered treatment, seeking the peace that fame never brought. She died in 1986 at just 26 years old, one of the first famous women to die of AIDS, her death largely unnoticed by a world that had once been unable to look away. Yet years later, her legacy has resurfaced. She has become an icon of beauty, of vulnerability, of the price of being seen, and the price of being forgotten. Gia Carangi didn't just change fashion. She exposed its heart. And to this day, in every raw, unconventional, authentic, fearless model who steps before the camera, a part of Gia still burns. We honor these great souls who have lost their lives but whose light continues to guide us. Their courage, their art, and their truth deserve to be remembered. If this tribute touches your heart, please subscribe to our channel and join us in continuing to honor the legends who are dead, but never forgotten.